This is a presentation. We're calling it Build Your Resume in 30 Minutes. All right, so first question, it's already come up in some of our panel conversation, but what's the difference between a resume, a CV, and a cover letter? Okay, so a resume is your most conventional job application document. It's 1 page in length, which should be moderately customized, and it's really a concise summary of only the most relevant information. A CV is really meant for more academic and international jobs. It can be more than 1 page. It often is. You really customize it minimally. It should summarize all your education and experiences. And if you've been able to publish any work or your name has appeared in any kind of periodical, you typically list it in a CV where you might leave it off a resume. So a cover letter is usually attached to an application. You may not require it for every application, but more and more you're seeing jobs that prefer a cover letter. A cover letter is, again, 1 page. It's highly customized for each opportunity. This is key. You really want to use your cover letter to get at why you are interested in applying for the job and why you are well fit for the position. You're highlighting your most important education and experiences. You're not listing all, and you're only highlighting the most important publications, periodicals you may have appeared in, not listing all like a CV. All right, so today we're going to talk about a resume and the things that might differentiate a resume like this on the left from a resume like this on the right, which is more effective in our opinion. So we're going to talk about formatting, we're going to talk about organization, and we're going to talk about content. So formatting is really all about spacing, font, and then presentation. All right, so let's get into it a bit. What do I mean by spacing? In a resume, you should utilize white space. You should have separate, clear, distinct sections. You should not feel the need to list every activities or write block paragraphs, and therefore you need to be concise. As far as font, you need to stick to a common, easily readable font. We would suggest Arial, Times New Roman. We don't want to see Wingdings, Comic Sans, any kind of other alternative, creative, unique fonts. I think it's wise to bold and underline important sections on your resume to create visual separation. So you may bold your education section. You may bold your relevant experience section, as you see from this resume. As Sarah mentioned, you may bold dates. You may bold locations. And lastly, no graphics and pictures. This is a hard rule. Now, the one exception I might say is if you're applying for a creative job, for example, advertising, graphic design, you may, I say may, want to get creative with this formatting. But the key to formatting is it's not the kind of thing that's going to get you a job or get you an interview, but it could lose you that interview. Because like Charlie said in our panel, people have 15 seconds to review the resume. They're looking for, is this crisp? Is this clear? And some people, honestly, they won't engage if the resume is not formatted appropriately. So what are the basic parts of a resume? How is it organized? Well, we like to think of it in 2 buckets. The first is core resume sections. This includes education and relevant experience. And then there is an optional bonus areas, as we call them, which makes sense to include if you have really great content, but are optional. That could be your objective, which is usually a sentence that gives you a theme at the beginning. It could be your leadership, volunteering. It could be your interests. Again, these are optional bonus sections. If you've got great content to fill in there, awesome. If it's going to work against you, feel free to exclude it. All right, now I'm going to turn to Ed, and Ed's going to walk you through some of the content section, really the meat, the heart and soul of your resume, and we're going to make it practical. We're actually going to start to create this right along with you. So Ed, want to take over?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm going to need that as well. All right, guys. So before I get into the details in the content section and what we're going to try to write here, I just want to make a point that the whole goal of writing this content is to create the best possible picture of you and the experience you have and the person you are, so you can get that interview, okay? And so as we go through each section, we're going to look at kind of trying to highlight the best parts of your experience. In the education section, there's obviously some things you have to include. Okay, so on the left, we have to put the university you went to. You're going to put the degree you pursued. Maybe you'll put a minor if you had one. But then at that point, you want to start really thinking about what you highlight and what you don't highlight as well. Okay? If you've got a great GPA, you're going to want to put it on there for sure. Right? Sometimes if maybe your major GPA is higher than your regular GPA, you could highlight that instead. Right? Really try to pick out the fact that you've really focused on your core classes that you've taken. Okay? And you did really well in those core classes that are critical to your major. If you've got awards, if you've got scholarships, if you've got some other distinctions, you definitely want to have those on there, okay? Because those really set you apart from the other applicants that are going for these jobs. If you've taken coursework that you think is particularly relevant to the job you're applying for, you want to put that on there, okay? If that coursework, if you've done really well on it, you've got a great grade, you can put that on there too. Okay? If your coursework has been super challenging, you want to highlight the fact that you've taken a really difficult course load, and that's you know, what your objective was in your college. Research experience, we're going to lean towards putting research experience in your relevant experiences section, highlight that as more something closer to a work experience. Okay, we're going to build that out later. So maybe you put it in here, but we think it should probably be later. Finally, standardized test scores. If you've knocked it out of the park in a couple of standardized tests, definitely put them on there. Sometimes if maybe you only had a really good quantitative score and the verbal wasn't so good, you can put on the ones that were good. You know, highlight those parts that you think are really put you in the best possible light. Okay, the next part we're going to talk about is that relevant experiences section. You'll notice here that we've intentionally called this relevant experience and not work experience, because there's a critical thing we want you to think about at this point. We don't want you to just focus on trying to highlight things where you were paid for or things that were researched in school in these sections. Okay, we want you to really think of a much wider range of experiences in your life that you can take and market skills from and really make yourself attractive to employers. So we want you to think really wide. We want you to think, you know, not just jobs and research. We want to think about group projects in your classes. If you worked in a group of people, we want you to think about that as maybe highlighting that in your resume. If you're a volunteer, we talked about volunteer experience could be used. In addition, there might be just household responsibilities or personal responsibilities you take on in your family that you could use to really show that you're a responsible and dependable person that they would want to employ. Okay? Because we want you to think really broadly about what you put in this relevant experience section. You can see on the left here, I've created one based on an experience that I had. It was a research assistant in a lab. Usually you want to be taking these sections, and when you're creating these bullet points in each section, there's a couple things you want to look at. Okay? Those activities, as was mentioned in the panel, should be starting with an action verb to really indicate the things that you're doing and to indicate exactly what you did at that position. Okay? Another thing you're going to want to think about is you're going to think about quantifying your impact and achievements. Okay? Try to put a number to everything to show that you were having value at that position. So you can see in this last bullet point, I managed a chemical inventory system for 6 researchers. Okay? It's a bit more important that there were 6 people depending on the fact that I was managing their inventory. Finally, you really want to minimize the technical jargon and scientific language if you've got something that's heavily on science. Okay, I like to call this the grandma test or the 10th grade kind of brother test. If these people that have limited scientific knowledge can read that section of your resume and get a pretty good idea of what you're doing, then it's passing the test. Now, the reason this is important is, I think, ties back to the panel discussion we had earlier. There are going to be people that read your resume that don't have a whole lot of scientific experience. Okay? They need to be able to read that and see the activities and the impact you were having without understanding all the technical jargon. At the same time, you need to be communicating what you were doing to someone who's actually making a hiring decision, that you were actually doing something scientifically relevant. So there's a balance to be struck there. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is pull out this worksheet, and we're going to think about all the possible experiences in your history in the last few years that you could use as experiences on your resume. Okay? We're going to think about work experience, jobs you've had. I want you to think about if you've done any research, things in a lab that you could highlight. We want you to put down class experience. If you've worked in a group project, worked with other students in a group setting, on a team, and you've produced something, you're going to want to put those down there too, okay? Finally, extracurricular, volunteer, if you have anything outside of school, outside of your classes, in your personal life, we want you to brainstorm those too. And at this point, we're just looking to capture everything you could possibly highlight on your resume, okay? Go really broad, think of everything you could, and then in the following sections, we'll figure out a way to whittle that down and put the best possible experiences on your resume. All right, so you've got a collection now of kind of every experience you could use on your resume. What we're going to do at this point, I'm going to walk you through kind of how you would build that one of those experiences out into a section for your resume, okay? So we're going to turn to the worksheet number 2. I want you to think of one of the experiences you have there, one you think you definitely want to put onto your resume, okay? And start thinking about the significant events that occurred when you were in that position, okay? So for my example, I'm going to use when I was part of a team that was working on a project in the lab for a whole semester, okay? The significant events that happened during that is we got to present our weekly results to our class and our peers, and we presented a final presentation to a client. And this was a company that asked us to work on a project for them over the course of the semester, okay? Over the second thing I want you to think about, okay, beyond just the significant events, are what your day-to-day activities were. What were your responsibilities at that position? What were you doing every day that were just things you picked up and like didn't really think twice about doing? But like take a step back and really think about those things, all right? So in this lab, we were trying to make a new polymer formulation. So we built and designed a testing apparatus. We created a plan for using that testing apparatus to evaluate a bunch of materials. We did some data analysis, and we actually developed a synthetic process as well to make these materials. Okay, so these are the kind of some of the things I participated in over the course of the semester and on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is use this model to take one of your experiences and really blow that out. Okay, think of everything you did on a day-to-day basis. What were you responsible for? What roles did you pick up? What activities did you pick up while you're in that position? All right, so now you got some events. You got some day-to-day activities, some responsibilities. Let's turn that into a section on the resume. Okay? So when you're thinking about building these bullet points in that section, the way I like to think about it is you got to tell a story around that experience in your life. Okay? The first bullet point that I wanted to point out in this is that I wanted to tell a story of what we were up to. Okay? So I took that, I was a member of a semester-long team point, and used that to create that we developed an electronically responsive polymer over a semester-long group project. Okay, so that communicates I was working in a team on a group, or a group team on a project. We developed a new material using an action verb at the start, okay, and it sets the context for the rest of the section. Okay, it's going to be very helpful to start off with something that tells the story. Next, I wanted to get into some day-to-day activities that I was responsible for. So I was designing and building the testing apparatus, and we were creating a test. I created a test plan, and laid out all the experimental conditions we were going to use. Okay, again, starting with those action verbs that describe exactly what I was up to, and then finally I wanted to cap it off with kind of the impact we had. We presented those results to the client and to our class. Okay, and that was kind of the culmination of that event in my life. Something else I just want to point out that if you're struggling for action verbs to use, we've got a handy-dandy list of them here. And it's kind of broken up by qualities you might want to communicate. So if you're trying to show that you're in a leadership role, you can pull from the center list. Okay? If you're trying to show that you're having a very creative approach to things, you can pull from the first one. And it's always good to try to think about those bullet points you're building in this context. Okay? Make sure you're communicating the skills and the character that you want to the employer when you're writing all those bullet points. Before we break out, just one more thing I wanted to highlight were some things to think about when you're writing those bonus sections. Okay, we mentioned that we could break the resume up into kind of core relevant experiences and the other special sections. Okay, those special sections can be whatever you want them to be, whatever fits best with the experience that you have and paints you in the best possible light, okay? Builds out your character as a person. So you have a number of section titles you could use. You can use leadership, you can use volunteering, you can use extracurricular, whatever you want to title that works best for the experiences you're trying to use, okay? We want you to really resist the temptation to make this a laundry list, though. Don't put everything you've done outside of work and that might not be really relevant to the job. Focus on a couple you think really paints the best picture of you, really gives them a good window into your character. You can definitely include community service, but try to focus on ones where you've had a real impact, where you've played a leadership role or where you've really spent a good amount of time there, okay? You can also think about using this section to put something funny within reason or to really add some color to your resume. Okay, these sections will often be where an employer or an interviewer will go to first to start the conversation with you. They'll find something that they identify with, some activity or a hobby that you're interested in that they want to start a conversation about, okay? So putting something in there with a bit of color is helpful, okay? At the same time, because of that, because these are things people might actually identify with, you want to make sure you're ready to speak about anything you put there. Don't just say you're into hiking if you've never gone outside, okay? This is the section you really want to make sure is very relevant and tailored to you because it's really your opportunity to connect with your interviewer and establish a personal relationship, okay? So make sure that's very relevant. And I think with that, I'm going to pass back over to Mark here, and he's going to take you guys through the next little part.
All right, thank you, Ed. This is our last slide here before we go into the breakout. We just want to tackle some final burning questions. Some of you brought this up already, but these is like our final sort of pieces of wisdom before we go into the breakout sessions. So, do I need an objective section? An objective section, as you mentioned, as you may remember, it's usually the 1 or 2 line sentence at the beginning of your resume that says why you're applying to the job. Our opinion would be that it's completely optional, and if you do include it, make sure it's customized for every job. Okay, it's a major turnoff if your objective is to get a job in an industry that you're not applying for. So make sure if you do include a custom job, if you do include an objective section, that it's customized for each opportunity. So next, can my resume be longer than 2 pages? This is a question we had. We're going to say the answer is no. At this point in your career, even 15, 20 years from now, the answer is no. A resume should be 1 page long. If you've got enough illustrious activities to fill 2, that just means you're going to have an even better single-page resume. So the next question, should you include your address in your resume? You'll see many templates online that have your address. We would say in this day and age, it's not really 100% necessary. You want to make sure absolutely you include your email address. That's going to be the most typical way people are going to get in touch with you. And I think it's wise to include your phone number as well. But physical address is probably not necessary. Can you include your high school experiences in your resume? Say with caution, and only if they're very high impact. Now, if you're a freshman, a sophomore, I'd say you've got a little more latitude there. If you're moving into junior and senior year, make sure it's a really high impact high school activity if you're choosing to include it on your resume. And can you include non-typical jobs, e.g. a ski instructor, on your resume? And we say, of course. The whole point of Ed's section about relevant experiences is that you can make any experience important and sound good for the job you're applying. The key is make sure to bring out those things that you did in that experience, regardless of where it was, that are most relevant to their job and really show that you made impact. So a couple other tips. As Ed said, be prepared to talk about anything that's on your resume. So I was a Russian minor in college, and about a year ago I was going for an interview, and someone started speaking to me in Russian. And when I couldn't respond, I thought really hard about whether I would include my Russian minor on my resume going forward. Anything on your resume is fair game, and for that reason, review your resume for 10 minutes prior to any interview. Okay, you may have written your resume 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. You submit it, maybe you submitted it 2 months ago for the job. You're not thinking of it top of mind, but your reviewer has it right in front of them, and they're ready. So make sure you go through that resume 10 minutes prior to your interview, and that you're sharp on every bullet on there. And finally, and this is, I can't highlight this enough, we've walked through some rules of resumes today, But the key thing is you can put anything and you can exclude anything from your resume. The key here is to make yourself look as good as possible. Okay? You want to highlight the most important things that make you look capable of doing the job that you're applying for, and you should feel free to exclude the things that may not be as relevant, that may work against you there. So put your best foot forward. That's key.